Dreams, dreams can take us across borders, across oceans even. The hope for a better life, for ourselves, for our families. But what happens when those dreams? Well, when those dreams turn into nightmares. Today, we're going to dive into a case that's both heartbreaking and mysterious. The story of Manuel Mosca Ruiz.
It really is a story that highlights the struggles, the unseen struggles often, of undocumented workers. These are people who risk everything for a chance, just a chance, at a better life. They come seeking opportunity, but often find themselves vulnerable, isolated.
Manuel Mosca Ruiz, he left Mexico back in 2003. He wanted a better life for his family. His wife was pregnant at the time, and he had a child to support. He came to the United States, looking for that chance, that opportunity to build a future. But tragically, that future was taken from him just a year later.
And what makes Manuel's case so haunting, so compelling, is the mystery that surrounds his death. His body, it was found in a remote area, a wooded area in Florida. Can you imagine? It was August, the heat, the humidity, just unforgiving. And the buzzards circling overhead. This place, it was known more as a dumping ground than anything else, a desolate place.
It's a chilling image for sure, and it gets even more disturbing when you hear about how the body was actually discovered. The property owner, a man named Billy Evans, he was just doing his routine check of the property when he came across this horrific scene. He saw the buzzards first, drawn to the area. That's what alerted him that something was wrong.
It's interesting because initially the location itself, the fact that it was known as a dumping ground, caused some confusion. Was this just another unfortunate discard? Or was it something more sinister? And the body, because of that intense Florida heat and the humidity, it was already in an advanced stage of decomposition. Immediate identification was impossible.
So how did investigators even begin to untangle this mystery? I mean, where do you even start with something like that? Were there any clues at the scene that could point them in the right direction?
There was one crucial piece of evidence. In Manuel's wallet, they found a Mexican voter ID card. It was the only identification he had on him. Now, there wasn't any cash in his wallet, but that fingerprint on the ID card, that would eventually be used to confirm his identity.
Wow, a single ID card. Amidst all that, the chaos of a dumping ground, that becomes the key. It's like something out of a detective novel, right?
Yeah.
What else did investigators find at the scene? Anything?
Well, the scene itself was sparse, unfortunately. Not a lot of information to go on. There were some drag marks, some tire tracks, but no blood, no bullets. This suggested to the investigators that, that the murder itself probably didn't happen there. The body had been brought to this location later.
Knowing that this was a known dumping ground, you might think, well, maybe the investigators wouldn't search it as thoroughly. But that wasn't the case here, was it?
No, not at all. You're absolutely right. And it really is remarkable how, even in a place like that, a place known for discarded items, investigators, they meticulously went through everything. I mean, every detail. They collected even the smallest pieces of debris. They even found a single can. It just shows their commitment, their determination to find anything at all that might be connected to Manuel's death.
So with that Mexican ID card as their starting point, investigators, they reached out to the Mexican authorities through the consulate in Atlanta. They needed to find Manuel's family. And his family, they were living in a rural town, a town called Tupataro.
And you can imagine the challenge, right? I mean, a cross-border investigation, trying to find a family in a small town, potentially thousands of miles away. It's truly a needle in a haystack.
So while that search for his family was underway, investigators, they were also trying to piece together, whatever they could about Manuel's life in Florida. What kind of life did he have here? What did they learn?
They looked at his clothing, they used their local knowledge, and they came to, what seemed like a reasonable assumption that Manuel was most likely a construction worker. And this made sense, really, given the amount of construction work in the area and the fact that it often attracts undocumented workers looking for jobs.
It's a logical starting point, for sure. But navigating that world, particularly when you're dealing with undocumented workers who might be, hesitant to talk to law enforcement, that must have presented a whole other set of challenges.
Without a doubt. They encountered a wall of silence, really. And this was due in part to the language barrier, but it was also because of the fear that many undocumented workers have. They're afraid to interact with law enforcement. I mean, you can just imagine that fear of deportation hanging over them. It makes them reluctant to share any information, even if they might have seen something crucial.
It sounds like the investigation was hitting a wall. But then a glimmer of hope came from a rather unexpected place, a Shell gas station not far from where Manuel's body was found.
And this seemingly ordinary detail, this gas station, ended up being a turning point in the investigation. It just shows that sometimes, well, sometimes the most valuable clues are hidden in plain sight.
So what was it about this gas station that caught the investigators' attention?
Ah.
What did they find?
Well, they discovered that Manuel had bought some prepaid phone cards. He bought them from that gas station. And this was just a few days before his body was found. August 11th, they got a hold of the phone records, and there was something very important in those records. The last calls that Manuel made were on the evening of August 11th. And of those calls, only one of them actually connected. And that one call, it was to his wife in Mexico.
Wow, what a breakthrough. So now they had a potential top line for when he disappeared and confirmation that he'd been in contact with his wife. Did they manage to track down his family in Mexico?
They did. After a month, a whole month of searching the Mexican consulate, they finally located Manuel's family in Tupataro. They confirmed that the call on August 11th, it was from Manuel, and their account of his life, it began to give investigators a clearer picture of the man, the man behind the mystery. And it was that routine, those calls back home, that suddenly stopped. After August 11th, nothing. Silence. Can you imagine what his family must have been going through? Not knowing. Those unanswered calls, that growing fear that something terrible had happened.
It's just heartbreaking to be so far away and have no way of knowing. Must have been agonizing. Did they have any idea at all what might have happened to him? Any clues?
Well, on top of the silence, there were also these rumors, these unsettling rumors. They started circulating back in Mexico. Whispers of trouble surrounding Manuel. But nothing specific, no details, just this growing sense of dread.
So they were stuck, thousands of miles away, left with just rumors and their worst fears. It just highlights the challenges, the unique challenges that families of undocumented workers face. The distance, the communication barriers, the legal uncertainties. It all creates this situation where they're often left in the dark when something goes wrong.
Exactly. And tragically, in Manuel's case, those fears, they became a devastating reality. When they got the news of his murder, it was like their worst nightmares were confirmed. But as heartbreaking as it was, they admitted that they had been kind of bracing themselves. After weeks of no contact and those rumors, they had this grim sense of anticipation.
So even with the family's confirmation and a timeline starting to come together, investigators hit a wall. Why? Why couldn't they get any further?
The community in Freeport, particularly those in the construction circles, the ones Manuel was part of, they stayed quiet. Tight-lipped. It's something that investigators often come up against in cases involving undocumented workers. There's this code of silence, you see. And it's driven by fear. Fear of being deported, fear of retaliation, even the fear of just being caught up in a legal situation.
Years passed, the leads dried up, and Manuel's case, it went cold. I mean, I know detectives have a lot of demands on their time they have to prioritize, but it doesn't make it any easier for the families who are left behind, does it?
You're right. It's a difficult reality. These cold cases, especially the ones involving vulnerable populations like undocumented workers, they often face an uphill battle. Not enough attention, not enough resources. But then in 2017, there was a glimmer of hope for Manuel's case.
Really? What happened? What changed?
A retired detective, Detective Sunday, he decided to take on Manuel's case, sort of like unfinished business. And he recognized that the language barrier, it had been a big obstacle in the initial investigation. So he brought in a bilingual deputy to help.
That's such a critical step, to have someone who can really connect with the community, understand the nuances of language and culture. It can make a world of difference. You have to build trust if you want people to open up.
Absolutely. And Detective Sunday, he wasn't just relying on those traditional methods either. He had flyers, distributed. He even got some TV spots put together, anything to keep Manuel's story out there in the public eye. And then in 2023, all that persistence, it paid off. He got a tip, a valuable tip, and it breathed new life into the investigation.
Wow, after all those years, a new lead. That's incredible. What can you tell us about this tip? What was it?
Well, the specifics are still confidential. But what I can say is that it made Detective Sunday and his team take another look at the evidence, everything, with fresh eyes. And this time, they were hoping to use some of the advancements that have been made in DNA technology, specifically a technique called MVAC.
MVAC. I've heard of that. Isn't that the new technology, the DNA technology, that's been helping solve so many cold cases? Can you explain a little bit about how it works and why it's so important?
You got it. You can think of MVAC like a DNA vacuum cleaner, it can extract even the tiniest traces of genetic material. And I'm talking about things that were previously thought to be too degraded, or too contaminated to analyze. Remember that single can that was found at the scene? Well, even after 2 decades, MVAC might be able to isolate Manuel's DNA from that can, and that could potentially link him to someone or someplace connected to his murder.
It's amazing what technology can do these days. To think that it could unlock secrets that have been hidden for so long, it offers so much hope, for justice in cases that were once thought to be unsolvable. What about Detective Sunday? What does he think about all of this? Is he optimistic about finally solving Manuel's case?
He's cautiously optimistic, I'd say. MBAC is a powerful tool, yes, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. They still need more information, more pieces to put together, to really understand what happened to Manuel and why. He's determined, though, determined to get those answers for Manuel's family, to bring them some peace, finally,
Yeah.
some closure.
Detective Sunday's dedication is really something, refusing to let this case just fade away. But he needs our help. He needs information. Those missing puzzle pieces, that's where we come in, right? The listeners. You might be thinking, well, how could I possibly help with a case that's been cold for so long? But you never know. Sometimes the smallest detail, something you might not even think is important, could be the key.
Absolutely. Go back to August 2004. Were you in Freeport, Florida? Did you see anything? Anything unusual? Anything that just seemed out of place?
Yeah, anything at all. Maybe you were at that Shell gas station, the one where Manuel bought those phone cards. Did you happen to see him there? Did you notice anyone he might have been with? Any vehicle he got into?
And don't forget the location where his body was found, that remote area on Magnolia Lodge Road. That area they called the dumping ground. It's possible that someone saw something suspicious there but didn't realize, how important it might be. Maybe a vehicle, a person hanging around, anything that seemed off.
It's easy to just dismiss those memories, the fleeting ones. We think, oh, it doesn't matter. But in a case like this, any little piece of information, no matter how small, could be what brings justice for Manuel and his family.
It's about more than just solving the crime, It's about giving a voice to those who can no longer speak for themselves. It's about making sure that Manuel's story isn't forgotten, that his life mattered. And it's about bringing peace to his family. They've been through so much, years of unanswered questions, unimaginable grief.
So if you have any information, any at all, about Manuel Mosca Ruiz, anything that could help Detective Sunday and his team,
Yeah.
please don't wait. Call the Walton County Sheriff's Office. Their number is 850-892-8111.
And if you want to remain anonymous, that's okay. You can call Emerald Coast Crime Stoppers. The number is 850-863-TIPS. Your call, it could be the one they've been waiting for, the one that makes all the difference.
Yeah, Manuel Mosca Ruiz came to the United States full of hope. He wanted a better life, a future for his family, and that future was tragically cut short. But his story, his pursuit of the American dream, it reminds us of the resilience of the human spirit and how important it is that we fight for justice, especially for those who have been silenced.
And it reminds us that undocumented workers, they face unique vulnerabilities. They're often afraid to come forward, afraid to report crimes. We need to do more to protect the most vulnerable among us. We need to create a society where everyone feels safe, where they feel empowered to speak out against injustice.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the case of Manuel Mosca Ruiz. Please share this episode, spread the word, keep his memory alive. And if you know anything at all, please reach out. You could be the key to bringing some closure to this tragic case and finally giving his family some peace.
And if you're interested in hearing more stories like this, more in-depth discussions, please subscribe to our podcast. We'll be back soon with another deep dive. Until then, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and let's all work together to make a difference.